So web scraping itself. That's funny, I repeated myself. Okay, so web scraping intro. All right, so we already talked about, where web scraping is important. Basically it's kind of like our last resort to get information. So I'm going to show you a web page. Oops, and I believe, let me check it's the same web page that way. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I'm going to show you a web page first. So I'm just going to this website because I just follow some, it's got a nice structure to it. So you can see here, basically it's a website with plenty of ads, but you can see that it just has different articles and stuff like this. The reason why I picked this is because I'm just familiar with the website. But you can see here is that there's some information. You can see that each article is essentially broken up into this little square, and you can click on it and you have a little blurb right here. You can see there's usually a center image of some sort, the author, when it was posted, for example. And then you can see actually some information here too. I think it's like how many people commented on it or like liked it or something like that, along with the title. And then a link actually to, like, if I click on this, for example, it should bring me to the full article page. And you can see here the structure going forward. Okay. And you can see there's comments like on the bottom and all that stuff. All right, so that's kind of like the basic website. So the main idea here is like, well, we'd want people to pull from this, right? So the first thing is basically literally looking at the website would be a useful thing. Say, what does this website look like? What are the information I need to pull from? And then you could do an inspect element. So let's see here if I'm actually going to move this over. So it's side by side. Okay. That's not the best. That is here. So you can see on the right here is all HTML. You can see that HTML, doc type HTML, HTML length. So if you do ever like file save as HTML, you would basically get this document. And you can see here, here's the whole body. You can see the head has a whole bunch of information that we're just going to ignore in this case because we can't see it. But you can see here's the body. And what's nice about if you use Chrome, and most inspectors have something like this, if you hover over, it'll actually highlight the part that you're hovering over. So like if I highlight over here, it knows that this is the div that I'm talking about. And then I might talk about, if I can find it, this here. You can see the different aspects of those parts. If I scroll up a little bit, maybe that's a little bit easier to see. You can see here's different parts. So you can kind of figure out what I'm looking at, okay? So you can see here for this container, basically, is going to be all this information. You can see here this primary column. This is not the best, because maybe I can expand this out a little bit more. Okay, that's a little better. You can see here's primary column. There's probably like a secondary column that's like right here, the sidebar. So you can see that part. You see it's a div. You can see it's a class, so primary column. So primary, note that this is not primary column, that's primary and column are its two different classes. So it has multiple classes in this case. You can see there's some class here, AINS, don't know what that means, probably something they use internally. And you can see some extra information as well. And so what we want to do is actually go to the post. We'd want to go to this specific one, for example. We're in this part right here. You can see there is an actual link to the comment section. So if I click on this, this would actually take me to that specific comment thread. Okay, but I don't want to go there. You can also see there is some other stuff. Looks like hotness meter. So some metric that they're using to do. Here's the actual heading title. So H2, you can see here is that this is the actual title. And you can see here's the actual text of that title. Amazon's new music HD offers title high quality. Hi-fi quality, right? And you can see there's links. So if I actually were to click on this title, it would actually take me to the article. So you can see that's where this href is too, okay? And then there's some metadata. So it looks like there's the author and stuff like that. We'll skip over share box, different categories. Here's the actual post picture. So note that we can kind of click on here and we can see that there's an image. So if we wanted to pull the image out, that's how we could find the images using maybe this class, maybe kind of digging deeper. And then going a bit little further, we can see the actual post content. So we can see there's a little blurb here. And note that these are all paragraphs. So you see that they're all paragraphs like this. And you can see here, this is a class of post content. So this is kind of like how we can look at a website on one side and also see what is the relevant information on the other side. Okay. So again, this is just the HTML itself. Cool. So kind of seeing that, we'll kind of go through a little bit of actually coding up to scrape it up. So first of all, we talked about the DOM model already. We can think of it like going through the structure. We can think of it like when we're web scraping, we're kind of going through the DOM and pulling out the relevant information. And then we might think of, like those different elements, like you saw on the slide, how they're kind of like tabbed inwards. You can think of them like as different siblings or descendants and parents, kind of like when we talked about XML when we're parsing through that part. The nice thing is that we don't usually have to use direct, going through that immediately. We can use package like BeautifulSoup, which is what we'll use today. Okay, so we'll use BeautifulSoup. Note that it's relatively faster than it's relatively fast as the parser itself. It's been around for quite some time, so it's got a pretty good following base. It tries to be more Pythonic, so it tries to use a lot of similar structure, like the way you would use Python. Is it the best web scraper? Not really, but it's really common and it's super useful. So I'm going to use that, and I think that's something that we use actually in the curriculum itself. So note that usually BeautifulSoup is imported. You have to install it from BS4, so that's the actual package name. But we're going to import BeautifulSoup itself. And then we also have requests, which is basically what we saw before. Request is just going to get the web page. So essentially what we're going to do, we're going to download the web page into Python, and then we're going to use BeautifulSoup to kind of search through it. And then also regular expressions, which we might talk about another time. So I found something really cool about regular expressions. Basically, it's a way for us to go through text and look for specific structures. So for example, you can use regex to specifically find an address-like element. So if something that looks like an address, you can use regex to say, well, it's going to have like, some numbers and then a space, and then something that's going to look like a street name, and then a comma with like the state and so on. So you can use regex to kind of help you find those parts too. Okay, so let's go ahead and import our libraries, and we're going to get the page. So the first step is we're actually going to get the actual web page itself. So note that I defined my own function here called getSoup. I'm passing in the URL. So the idea here is we just pass the URL and it'll basically get that information. And then it'll use requests, right, to get that URL. And then it's going to return the web page. And then I also have it return the BeautifulSoup. This is how you would actually parse, basically get past the web page content, right, the actual web page, pass it into BeautifulSoup, and note that I'm using an HTML parser. Basically, the parser is just saying, how's it going to read through this document? In this case, it's saying, oh, this is an HTML document, so it's going to use an HTML parser. So I'm just specifying this specifically. I think the default might not actually be HTML parser, but oh well. So that's what it's doing here. I'm returning a tuple of the actual web page so we can check it out if we need to, and then just getting the BeautifulSoup, which is what I'll actually be working with. Okay, so I run this guy. So that's just my function definition. So note that I put the page here being the web page, and then soup. You'll see this very commonly referred to as the soup itself. Basically, it's a structured way of going through that web page. So I'll get soup, and this should take a little bit of time, not too long. And you can see it took a little bit of a second, but it eventually got it. And so now we actually have this page, and now I can do the page.content. So I do page.content. You can actually see this is literally just a string of all the data that we saw when we did inspect elements. So you can see here the doc type HTML, this part here. So you can see there's a whole bunch of information, but this would be really awful to try to like read this through, right? Trying to go through it. You could try to do things like prettify and stuff like this, but we can also see soup, which is basically that same content, but just put into a little more structured format. If I print out soup, note that it automatically tries to make it nice and pretty. So note that it already put in those new tabs and everything like that. So this is a little bit easier for us to read. Still not ideal in a lot of ways, right? But you can see at least a little bit more easily readable. So this can be helpful when you're trying to debug and trying to figure things out without going back to the web page, inspect an element. You can look at directly what you pulled up and see what's there. Okay, so cool. We got the information. Next part is actually going through it. But before I move on to that, questions on how I retrieved all this information, what's going on here in the background? Thumbs up sounds pretty good so far. Yeah, I haven't really called much, right? Like literally two commands. But that's the whole point, right? So that's how as simple it is to get the information.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
So that when you called like the get soup, you have page, comma, soup. Why do you need page, comma, soup? Oh, is that because it's like web page, return web page, comma, BeautifulSoup?
Oh, you're talking about this part right here?
No, like the next line, you have page, comma, soup.
Oh, this guy right here. Yeah, so I could have technically, let's see if I did this real quick. I'll just put X, right? Oops. And if I do, we'll see what happens if I do print X. You can see here, basically, it's a tuple, which is my response. And then the rest of it, the soup. So basically, this is a quick way when I do page, comma, soup. It basically is getting just this part as page and just this part as soup. So I could have equivalently done something like page is equal to x0. And then what's the next one? Soup is equal to x1. That would have worked just as good too.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks.
No problem. All right, so I'll go ahead and move on then to the next part. Sound good to everyone? Cool. All right, so now we get to actually crack our knuckles and see, actually parsing this page, right? So now we have, we're gonna find all the images. So note that these images, if I find all the images, it's gonna be every little thing, right? That's an image. So it might also include, like from this drop-down menu, of these different images as well. So let's do it. So we have our soup. Remember, that's all our structured, our web content, but just all structured. We're gonna find all tags that are in img, right? So I do this, and that basically pulls out all images. Note that I'm not re-downloading the web page. The web page is already on my computer, so I don't have to do anything special. So that's why it's super quick. So now I can do some things like print out how many images there are, print out the first image just to see what that looks like, right? What that tag looks like, and then we can also look at the source. So you can see here there are 74 images that it pulled up. You can see this print images, this first tag right here. I don't know why I did the first tag or the second tag, number 1, I think, whatever. You can see here is that the img, this is the whole tag itself. So if I were to actually find that very first image, that is the very first image with the source. Okay, so what's kind of cool is that I can actually go to this source, which is what this part right here. So note that with BeautifulSoup, this is the actual tag, and I can pull up that attribute, the source, src, right? And that will actually print out this information right here. So that's pretty nice. If I did, for example, class, right? Just to kind of show you guys a little bit what this looks like. If I do class, you can see here, it prints out this right here, okay? But if I want source, and what's cool is that I can actually go to this website, okay, and you can see here, that is the very first image, or I guess the second image technically, because I pulled out one. But you can probably find it on here somewhere. It's probably under, I don't know where it's at. Oh, somewhere. That image exists somewhere on this web page. It might be within like these, if I had to guess, oh, here it is. So you can see here, that's like the first image that I pulled out. Okay, cool. So then we can actually say, do other things. For example, if you can find all the divs, which will be many, many divs, right? So this is all the different, like you can see right here, basically there's different containers containing other things. So you can do this, and you can see 468. So there's a lot of divs. So that's probably not the best one, but let's just kind of check out like the first 10, right? So you can see here, there's a div ID tip US. Basically, these look like they're probably contained within each other. So div class container, 16 columns. This is basically structuring it. You can see here within this div, it also shows, like when I print out this div, it also shows what's contained within there. So you can see within this div, it actually has a link and a heading in here. So this is where you might want to print out a specific div and just see what's in that specific part. Note that I'm getting all of them, so I'm not specifying, but I'm not specifying specific classes and stuff like that, which we'll likely do if we want to web scrape. Okay. So let's see if we start with number 4. So let's see if we start with 4. You can see here, this is the actual div itself. Okay, so note that I want to find its other siblings and stuff like that. Basically, ones that are still at its same level. So you can think of like there's another div just above it, but not nested in. So we can see maybe it's like what's the next sibling underneath it. And so we can see here that is the next sibling right here. Tip us, body, div class, this thing. So this is the next sibling going over. If I were to kind of print this out, let's see if I can put in a new. Try to make this do this delicate so I don't do it too bad. All right, so let's do from like 3 on to like 7. And so you see here is that the 4th one should be this one right here, right? Tip us. And the next child looks like it's going to be this guy right here. So you can see this is where you can kind of go through each process going forward. If we go back to the website, I'm kind of going back and forth. Let's see if I can find tip us real quick. Oh, here it is. So you can see here, that's my tip us. And do an inspect. Have it load a little bit. So you can see here, if I go up to, where are we? This is the actual div here. Oh, that's probably not the only one. Okay, so this is probably not the right one. There's probably another tip us. So I thought I was going to pull it up real quick, but I cannot. So that's okay. All right, I'll just move on. But note that we could also have looked at the HTML document, see what the next siblings are. But the point is that now that we have a way to find a div, like if we start off with a specific div, like, oh, div number 4, well, we can basically go down forward and basically find its other siblings going forward. So you can like imagine if I have something like this, you can go find off each next one. That's what that find next sibling is. Okay. So cool. All right. So that's how we find our next sibling. And then if we actually want to do something like find all, the div with, find all divs with a specific class. So in this case, if I go back to here and I want to look at, let's say, this guy. Here we go, div class. So I'm trying to see, you can see post. There it is. Okay, div class post. So you can see here, each one of this guy right here is just your div class of all these posts, right? So now I can start basically finding that specific one and use that specific class, and you can see that there are 10 in this case. So then if I can just go ahead and do D, let's just go ahead and D all of them. Oh, that won't work well. Let's just do the first one. Okay, so, well, not the first one, the second one. So you can see here, this is our div class post, and you can see within here, there's going to be a bunch of extra information. So this is how you can basically go deeper and deeper within this, finding specific parts of it. Okay, so I just wanted to show you a little bit of like how this would structure. To be quite honest, usually it's best to do this stuff when you're trying to play around with things and see if you can kind of like find those different parts. This is where you can specifically say, this is kind of like a dictionary. You can actually use this to find certain aspects of that div and kind of explore a little bit deeper and deeper in here. Okay. All right. Any questions on any of this?
So the site has like find all with find and then the A capitalized, like no underscore, but I'm guessing it's the same, right?
Oh, is it find all like this?
Yeah, but no underscore. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I think that might be the same thing. Maybe it's two different methods. Let's see if you can just do this. So find all, name, and everything like that. Doc string. Let's see if I can do. It might just be an alias for the same thing. That'd be my guess, is that they're just different ways to do the same thing.
It looks like the same. Okay, cool.
All right, and note that there's a whole bunch of things that we can do as well with this. So one thing to note if you're doing real web scraping, as along many web pages, one is you probably want to be careful not bogging down their website. If they're a modern website, you probably aren't going to bog it down, but there are cases where you can accidentally. And also finding information and pulling it through everything. I'm going to show you one of my things I've done in the past, which has anyone heard of the beer mile before? I have never participated, but yeah. So, okay, good. So good. Someone knew. Last time I talked about this, I think no one knew what the beer mile is. So the beer mile essentially is you run the mile drinking beer. So after every lap about, I think, well, here you go, 4 beers, 4 laps. After every lap you run, like 1/4 of a mile, you would drink a beer. And I think there's certain rules, like, you know, you have to like make sure you drink all of it, you turn upside down. And I think at the final one, you have to drink it. There's some modifications I've heard people do, things like you can drink all your beer at once and then run your mile, which I don't know who the heck would want to do that. But there's certain modifications. Well, this website calls themselves the Official Beer Mile Resource. And I was like, this is a really interesting website. So you can actually check this out and you can see they have different results. If I just click query here, let's see if it pulls up anything. So you can search for specific parts, but I'll just show you like one, for example, is you can see here's a different race, and this is all user entered data, it looks like, or actually don't even think it's user entered. I think it's like they literally like had to mail this person, like email this person, say, hey, can you put this on here, whatever. So you can see here, this is a participant of 1. Maybe there's only 1 person who wanted to put their name on here. Maybe it's just 1 person, but there's different tags here as well of different like rules and stuff like going through. Vomit penalty, you can probably guess what that is and everything. Let's see if I can find another participants. Oh, here, 40 participants. That's what we want. Okay, so you can see here, this right here is like another interesting information. So I thought that was kind of interesting, you know, little database going on here. They don't have an API. They don't have a direct database on here. So this would be a prime candidate, for example, for web scraping. So for example, if I go to inspect here, you can probably see that's going to be a table. And you can see here, yep, we got a table here. So you can probably find this table, search for this guy exactly. One thing to note though, I've explored this website before, is that you can see like, okay, look, we have name, time, gender. So you can probably go through each web page, right, and figure out those different parts. What's kind of fun is that I actually found out, this is one of those things like if there's private data, you can just change the URL here and you can get each individual point. If you ever design a website, don't do this. This is a really bad idea because basically it means it's really easy to be web scraped and also pull out private data. However, note that if I go like to this part, note that there's nothing. Again, I already know this because I've explored this web page before. But if I go to event 2, let's see here. I think it started at 12. There it goes. I know that started off and then they took a huge part. But note that there's different information. So for example, I have name, time, gender, beer, but note that there's age on this case. So this is where web scraping is really important in the sense like know that your table is not going to look the same each time. There's also like, you know, if I click on these different aspects, looks like there's information about these people if they did other races and stuff like that. I wonder if the 40-mile one or 40 participant one had multiple people possibly. And you can even see there's a type of beer here and other notes. So it looks like there's only one here. But you can kind of explore this. It'd be kind of an interesting thing to pull out information out. So I actually did a little bit just to kind of play around with it, just to kind of check things out. And I'll share with you guys that once I pull it up. Just do beer now. Beer. Oh no. So this is definitely like not a full complete like I want to make that very clear. This is not complete in everything, but you can see different ways you can kind of explore if you want to see like, oh, what's one way you can do this. This is more for fun, obviously. Like I don't think there's anything useful in the sense of like for data science to pull this out. But if you want this information, yeah, of course the IPNB didn't load, but you could kind of do this. I will say I've done this before for like the Olympics, for example. It turns out it's not easy to get the data from the Olympics without paying for it. In some API, it's not super easy, and I was looking for a long time, so I found the best way. It's like, let me try to scrape it. I'll tell you a little story of like a little sob story about me trying to web scrape, how frustrating it can be. So I did this web scraping for this, what's it called? This Olympic stuff. And I was able to pull a lot of information. I wanted to pull a lot of the information about like the actual participants and their timings and stuff. Usually they just talk about gold. And like, if you look at articles, usually they just talk about how many golds or how many silvers and stuff. I wanted something more about like the individual people itself. So I was able to kind of pull this together, this Olympics data, basically reading it all through. I came to a point of like, okay, like I think I feel pretty good. Like, you know, I think this is pretty good. I'll run the whole script. I've been testing it out on like certain like pages and stuff. I get to pull information. I'm like, okay, cool. Like I can actually have this run and it should be, you know, kind of done. I'll run it tomorrow morning. Right. Went to bed, go, you know, go there. I come back the next morning and I kid you not, like the next day they had changed the website structure. So all that work that I had done trying to make the web scraping part completely just overwritten. There's some things you could get around like web archive and stuff, but it was definitely very much like a defeated moment to be like, oh, things have changed. Which, just to kind of put a little thing, this happens. Sometimes websites go like change. Sometimes the very smallest things can change, and then you're kind of like, oh no, I need to completely change my, you know, structure. One thing you can do is you can start doing things like with workers too, and make it more basically have it get multiple web pages, so you're not getting one web page every single time. You could get multiple web pages and then process them through. You can make it more generic too. This is actually, it's kind of saying about like changing websites. This is actually why things like LinkedIn and other, you know, Airbnb, they change their website structure internally. Like you can see like in the HTML document, they'll actually change the structure to prevent people from web scraping all their information and stuff like that, which makes sense from their side. They don't want other people to get this information if it's kind of like on their side and everything going forward. There have been kind of like semi cases of like people saying it's illegal and stuff. For the most part, it's more of a gray area than anything, but just kind of be aware. Usually if you're doing it for like kind of research, not profitability, you're pretty safe in that way. And to be quite honest, it's getting more towards the end of like web scraping itself is not a criminal act, you know, because there's nothing wrong with that in the sense of like looking at your poster. But of course, I'm not a lawyer, so like just take everything I say with a grain of salt. And also, if you find things that you're not supposed to see, if you somehow are able to, you're web scraping, you know, the CIA's, you know, web page, and you somehow get something that you're not supposed to, I'm gonna tell you what, just because you can get to it doesn't mean it's the right, that you're perfectly legally able to get it. So just be aware that protecting people's information, like if you come across something, you know, ask yourself a question first before you start doing it. Okay. But yeah, that kind of finishes up web scraping. We'll talk a little bit on Friday then. We'll do like a little web scraping, you know, kind of a code along, you know, so you guys can kind of code with me and stuff like that, and we can put things together and stuff. Okay. Yeah, so any questions for anything that we talked about today? the web scraping aspect, HTML, CSS structure. No?
Nope, I'm good.
Cool. All right, so I'll go ahead and stop recording here then.